I am super, super excited this week to be joined by Enrique Rubio. And Enrique and I met, he probably doesn't remember this because he was still on his road show just as he was launching his business. But first, I want to do this. I want to do a quick visual description. I am a white woman with mid-length red hair. I'm wearing a white shirt. Behind me, I've got a maroon wall and some candles and a fountain. And I'm not in my office, y'all, because my basement flooded.
Oh,
So never a dull moment. So Enrique, I am delighted. Please introduce yourself. You and I have had several opportunities over the last couple of years to collaborate, and I really wanted you to come on and talk about HR's role in DEI and really how that's particularly been shifting in the last 2 years. So tell us about yourself and why you started this amazing organization.
yeah, Mo. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to be part of the show and the conversation. And my name is Enrique Rubio. I am the founder of this Hacking HR global learning community. I started my career in technology. I am an electronic engineer by sort of my academic profession and 10 years practice. And then I moved into HR both by coincidence, but also by finding out that I enjoyed working with people more than I enjoyed working only with technology. Sometimes I'm like, do I regret that decision or not? I'm not sure. But overall, it's been a very positive experience for me to be in HR. I worked as a consultant, then I worked in the corporate world. And a couple of years ago, I went full-time into doing this work with Hacking HR, which has been an incredible thing for me. I'm hoping that it's been incredible also for the community that I'm serving. But if I always say that if I only change one life and that life is mine, I mean, it's been an amazing experience for me to be doing this. I have met so many wonderful humans, and I know that I have connected so many of them that, I mean, they could have connected on their own before, but I provided bridges for them to connect with each other from around the world. So it's been a great, great experience. And that's who I am, and I know that the topic of this conversation is more around, DEI and B, and I am extremely passionate about this, being not only because it's the right thing to be passionate about, it is the human thing to do. I am a Latino man in the United States. So even though I have been very fortunate to never have to go through any personal experience of being having some discrimination against me, at least that I have perceived it, I know friends, family, and the extended community who may be victims of some sort of discrimination or racism just because of the color of their skin or their accents or things of the kind. So anyway, long introduction. I'm excited to be here. Thank you, Mo.
Well, I think it's important because you even in the way you introduced yourself, you talked about serving your community. You talked about why you do the work. You talked about, and even the name, right? Hacking HR. The approach that you're saying is we're doing this differently. These old so let's talk about what is the history of HR, right? And how suddenly are we where we are, where in many cases DEI lives in HR.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going to begin here. I think the history of HR as a concept has been around for about 100 years. It started in the early 20th century, coinciding with the peak of the second industrial revolution, the mechanization of work. And what happened was that companies needed somebody to take over hiring, firing, more so firing, paying people, and, slash exploiting people, because even back then people were still working 14, 18 hours a week. Minors, people who were underage were still working, and that was legally allowed. So HR came to exist at a time where it was called personal management, to do just that, to manage people and to manage firing, hiring, and paying. It evolved from there, and it became more strategic, at least as a theory, as a concept. But it is only now that we are seeing a more innovative, a more agile, a more human kind of HR. And I say this with all the love that I have for HR, because this work is not easy, and especially it's not easy what I do. because I am trying to help HR professionals embrace the power that they have to literally change the world. And you may say, or somebody may say, oh, you're so naive, Enrique. How do you think we're going to be able to change the world? And this is what I tell people. Humans spend a third of their lives at work. So if you create an amazing experience for them at work, they would probably be amazing humans and citizens of the world out there. But if you create a crappy experience for them in the workplace, they would probably reflect those behaviors in their families, as neighbors, in their communities, and whatnot. So there's a connection between creating a better society, creating a better world, and the work that we do in HR. If we are able to design a better experience, a better human experience, and that includes DI, a better human experience in the workplace, those humans, the hope, and I am sure it's going to happen, will go out there and again, be better citizens, be more involved in the social, economic, political processes in their countries and whatnot. So to me, that power that we have in HR today has been one of the most difficult things to build, because still a lot of people in HR see themselves as, hey, I'm on a higher fire pay and do a couple of other things, and that's pretty much it. And I'm like, no, once you embrace the power that you have, even if you don't know how to do it, what I can promise you is that you're gonna get on the journey to learn the skills and the capabilities and the things you need to learn in order to bring that vision to reality. Now, if you have some skills, but you don't believe that that's what we can do as HR, nothing matters then, because then you're just going to be doing the transaction and the administration that defined our profession for so long, ever since we were personnel management. So that's my sort of a little bit of the history of HR, but also this idea that drove me to create this community, to create this hacking HR community.
Well, I have to say, Enrique, right, we're so aligned, right? That's why we do the work that we do at Moxie. That's why we created Everyday Inclusion, right? Because we really believe in this ripple effect that becomes a positive tsunami.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And when people are able to thrive at work, they're able to thrive in the world and change the world.
Yeah.
It's interesting. The community that you're creating and people understanding that role, what percentage of HR practitioners right now do you think are there? Because I know what my number is. I'm curious what your number is.
It's a very small number. And in fact, I'm going to actually quote somebody. I'm not going to say her name, but when I was talking to her this week, I told her, it's not easy to do what I do. You have to be very strong, if you will, because sometimes you encounter people who are exactly the opposite of what you're trying to build, and you try to inspire them to think differently, and they are so entrenched in that place that's frustrating. And she said to me, I think probably 85% of the people in HR are still in that position. Maybe 10-50% of the people in HR are the ones that are making the leap, that are taking the leap of faith into something so much better, so much different than what we have today. And what I said to her, regardless of the number, what I said to her was that even if that was just 15%, what we have to do with that 15% is that we have to create such a strong, empowered, and inspiring community of HR leaders in that 15%, that even those 15 can move the world forward, right? Because it's not the majority, but it's still, with the power of their actions, the power of their role modeling, of their inspiration, they can hopefully bring on board some of the other 85% by moving not only the profession forward, but again, by moving the world forward through the profession of HR.
Well, and, when you think again about the exponential number. So if you've got that let's call it 15%, I think that's generous.
Yeah, I think it is.
But who they're mentoring and sponsoring and modeling, right? So kind of the next generation. And you and I know are really in alignment that, I think even 3 years ago, Enrique, when you thought HR and diversity, equity, and inclusion, there was sometimes an overlap, and I usually found it in smaller organizations where it's like, oh yeah, and now you have DEI.
Yeah.
And now I've seen really more of a shift, right? And that it's becoming integral to the work, which makes so much sense.
Yeah.
So what have you seen kind of in terms of this transition into HR really leaning in more on their role on DEI?
Yeah. Well, there are a couple of things to say in there, and I'm going to begin just sort of stepping back and maybe providing a more general perspective here. There are a lot of things that we are dealing with today that feel as if they were new problems, but they are not. And in fact, I dare to say that a lot of the things that we're dealing with right now, 99.9% of all these problems existed even before COVID. They were just amplified by COVID, and they were made worse than they were before. But the reality is that we were warned about a lot of these things, and we didn't take either enough action or any action at all.
Yep.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion. I don't know if you remember in early in 2020, I don't remember exactly when it was, that George Floyd was murdered, and that re-energized again a movement that already existed, the Black Lives Matter movement. But before that was the Me Too movement, and before that there was something else. And we didn't take perhaps enough action to solve the problems from the core, to solve the roots of the problems. Now, those problems were amplified by the murder of, Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, and the many things that have happened over the past couple of years, right? So my sort of my predicament here, and the reason why I'm sort of like stepping back, is how many more instances do we have to go through to realize that we have to take action on something?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe one more tangible concept is the very idea of remote work. Remote work has been around ever since the advent of the internet. I mean, we're talking about 20, 30 years that this idea, Alvin Toffler, 50 plus years ago, talked about people working remotely through technology. So these are not new concepts for us. So on the positive side, there are things that have happened that have forced us in HR to pay more attention and to take more care of things that are important, like diversity, equity, and inclusion. But on the other side, what I fear is that a lot of the things that we're doing are very reactive to the circumstances, rather than us getting ready for significant shifts. Yeah. One thing that we have to warn, we are already warned about this, is that the demographic shifts in the world are significant right now. I mean, population growth is going to slow down. Just in the US, I read recently about the slowdown in birth rates, which is going to create a significant talent problem for us in this country over the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years.
Not going away. Not going away.
It's not going to go away. So I'm not saying solve something today for the next 50 years. What I'm saying is pay attention to these things that are important. So going back to this idea of DEI, the population, demographics are changing. Our customers are changing. The race, the ethnicity, gender identity, or sexual identity, all of these elements are changing in society, and we have to respond to them. And I am hoping that we'll respond more proactively, rather than just waiting for the things, for another pandemic to happen for us to take action. So that's my one, perhaps, call to action here. It's, yes, we've gone a long way. We have done a lot of things, but what if, instead of just waiting for things to happen, what if we believe that the things that we're being warned about are actually true? And maybe we start taking a little bit of action. We don't have to do a lot, but maybe just a little bit of something to get ready for that one trend actually becoming reality.
What's interesting is I've been saying for the last 2 years, this is an Etch-a-Sketch moment, where you Etch-a-Sketch and then if you don't like what that picture is, you shake it.
Yeah.
And you get to start with a clean slate. We have a clean slate opportunity.
Yeah.
And we should not want to go back to the way work was designed in the past. It wasn't working for most people, right? As you said, these are not new problems. And so when we have these strategic HR leaders that are really willing to say, to seize this moment and create workplaces that are better, right? That are evolved, that have new systems, that have new process, that have new focus, that really meets the needs of the humans, the literal human beings that are working in these organizations.
Yeah. What's interesting is that for some business leaders, when we say creating workplaces that meet the needs of the humans, that may sound as not number one fluffy, and number two, it sounds like, well, we're not a nonprofit, or we're not a co-op here, right? We have to make money. But what they don't understand is that by creating a workplace that meets the needs of the people, the opportunities for that workplace to be way more competitive, to outperform everybody else in the industry, are dramatically accelerated and increased just by meeting those needs for the people. If you think about, for example, addressing the mental health crisis that we have around the world, the implications of that at work in increased productivity, less people quitting their jobs, maybe even attracting better talent. If you build a better human experience at work, then you are creating the avenues for your employees to, for example, become not just more productive as in an efficient machine, but using their full talents, creativity, potential, and skills for the benefit of the company, which they understand as the benefit for themselves as well. So we're not talking about separate things when we say creating a workplace that is more profitable and sustainable and meeting the needs of the people. It's the same thing. It is just two sides of the same coin. I just don't understand why it is so hard for so many business leaders to see this way. Let me just tell you this story that I'm sure you know. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, the Business Roundtable, the most powerful business leaders in the world, they got together and they said, oh, purpose is important at work, and maybe even more important than profit. And what I was thinking is, like, you guys are 50 years late, I mean, you guys are, it's like, you guys are discovering something that has been talked about for decades now. And for decades, many researchers, many experts, and people who were envisioning a different kind of work had been saying, or were saying, if you build a workplace where people find meaning, where people find purpose at work, and there's a connection between what they do, what the workplace is doing, they will be so much better, so much more productive. Their full creativity will be there producing for you. Now, if you do the opposite, well, you're just destroying that capability, that possibility. So now, only 3 years ago was when we recognized that this was important. I mean, come on. So that's what I'm saying. It's building a workplace that meets the needs of the people and helping that workplace to be competitive, profitable, sustainable in the long term are the same thing. It's just different flavors, but the same thing.
So here's what I love. You have convened so many conversations around this. And you've been able to get a peek in the box at different industries, different organizations. What are some of the best practices that you are seeing in HR as they relate to diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yeah. Well, the first best practice that I want to say is build the best practice that makes sense for you as an organization. And this is very important because, I have interviewed people from, say, companies like Google or Amazon or Microsoft, which are some of the largest companies in the world. And even they tell me when I interview them, we don't got it all figured out in here. We are on a journey like everybody else, maybe because our name, it feels and seems as if we are further ahead in the journey, but it's our own journey. So, embrace the idea that your journey is your own journey. The second thing that I want to say, which has been a fantastic practice from a lot of people that I hear in the space of HR regarding DEI, is just be curious about the people, about your processes, about your organization, about your industry. That curiosity will take you on a journey of discovery that will be incredibly beneficial for you individually and for the organization, as you are going to be asking questions and the answers will be there. Very often we get paralyzed because either we don't have the answer or because we don't want to ask the question. But once you embrace that journey of curiosity, you are going to be setting yourself up for success, for the possibility of discovering things that you may not have known before. So it is embracing your own journey. Number two, embracing curiosity. Making sure that you're including people, that you're building a culture where you take into account that diversity is not enough. If you want to build a great culture and a great organization, you need diversity, you need inclusion, you need equity, you need equality, you need psychological safety, you need belonging. All of these things, it's like all the legs in one table, and if you take one of them off the table, the entire thing falls down. So you have to take all of these elements into consideration. For example, so many organizations have put so much effort and energy into expanding their talent pipeline to include people, diverse candidates and diverse workers in their workforce, only to see them leave a few months later because the culture is not inclusive for that kind of people. It's awful. Yeah. And this is happening to the very chief diversity officers that they are hired somewhere. They're leaving.
Set up to fail.
They are set up for failure because they are not given the resources. And even when they are given the resources, you have to go through layers upon layers of, approvals and bureaucracy to get stuff done. And then you say, well, wait a second, you brought me, I'm a Black woman and I'm a Black man, I'm a Latino man, whatever I am. You brought me to build your diversity function and you don't want to build an inclusive organization. You have nothing if that was the case. So again, number one, embrace your own journey, embrace a journey of curiosity. More importantly, make sure that if you're building a culture that truly believes in this, you take into account all those elements that I talked about before: diversity, equity, inclusion, equity, equality, belonging, psychological safety.
What's interesting, Enrique, about so much of what you said, embracing your own journey, I think one of the things that we found that was probably one of the most surprising pieces from our metadata from 2021 is that industry did not matter in terms of people wanting to lean in and do the work of being inclusive. And I think there's often this idea that, if we're a tech company, we're ahead.
Yeah. No.
Right. And so I think that right where you said embrace your own journey, you can be, as we saw from our data, you can be in manufacturing, you can be in healthcare, you can be in banking and finance, you can be in all these different spaces, and your industry does not matter. What matters is, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Right? And how are we equipping our leaders? How are we equipping individuals? I think the other thing, and I should probably have T-shirts made up with it, because it is curiosity is an absolute superpower when it comes to this work.
Yeah.
And staying curious, because just because something worked for your organization 6 months ago, it may not, right? Things change so quickly. So you have to stay curious about what's working and what's not.
Yeah.
Right. And so how you can leverage things that are working and let go of those and replace.
Yeah.
I think that piece is, and then 100% on you cannot have one of these things. I love how you described it like legs on a table.
Yeah.
Right. Because you have to have that balance. Because if you're just working on inclusion and everybody looks the same.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Or if you're, the flood of money that's happened with bringing in diverse talent to what I say is a very unethical practice of putting them in toxic work environments, because we know the psychological, we know the physiological, the damage that you were doing to human beings by putting them in workplaces where they have to code switch or cover or literally don't feel safe, right? Because we know that the neural pathways that are firing when you feel excluded are the same as physical pain.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. The stakes here are really high.
Yeah.
So I'd love the thread that you had throughout this is that it is all about kind of staying vigilant, right? There's a constancy about this, that it doesn't go away.
Yeah. And one thing that I understand is that it is complex, right? But in the complexity is when we can be more humans. And what I mean by that is, if you know that you want your organizational culture to be different and you have no idea how to do it, whether you are in HR or a business leader in another unit, just come forward and say, we want to build a different organization. How do we do it? Let's get everybody together. People will respect that way more than if you try to fake it until you make it, which is ridiculous. And this leads me back actually to something about curiosity. People, I think, will be more forgiving and will give you more leeway if you come forward and you say, I don't know how to say this. I don't know how to ask this question. I don't know how to define this group of people, rather than you making assumptions that may be absolutely wrong. I recently interviewed somebody in the Hacking HR podcast, and she said to me, this is an HR leader. She said, I was sitting with two business leaders. And because of my name, she's a Latino woman, because of my name, one of the business leaders made an assumption and said, oh, because you are like this because you're Latino. And she was like, no, I was actually born here, even though my family is from Latin America. So blah, blah, blah. And then the other business leader in that table asked her something about her culture, about her family. So what she was trying to tell me was, you got two different approaches in there. One is the person who is trying to make an assumption because what they think you are. And the other one is the person who is curious and wants to know more and learn more about you because they are genuinely curious. So as you're building this better culture that of diversity, equity, inclusion, equality, equity, belonging, and psychological safety, if you don't have the answers, don't make assumptions, just ask people, and they will give you that freedom to be ignorant and still ask the questions so that they can learn.
Yeah, and I think and I'm going to put a slight asterisk by that. And that is, we also have to have well-placed curiosity.
Absolutely.
A part of that is doing the learning and doing the work myself.
Yeah.
And not putting, right? So I'm not like, Enrique, tell me all about,
yeah.
Right? Like this culture and what, because I might be one person that's asked you, but you might be, right? People are asking you to speak for Latino men again and again and again and again, versus I got to do some work.
Yeah.
Right. So that I'm not putting the emotional burden. I'm not putting the labor
on the full accountability.
Yeah. Right. So it is approaching with curiosity, but also, what am I doing to learn? Right. What am I doing to equip myself? And then I can go and say, Enrique, tell me, like, here's what I learned. Tell me about, right. Does that work for you? That's a different conversation than I'm lazy and I'm privileged. And I get to, right? So what do you hope for 5 years out?
Well, I'm hoping that climate change is not, that we take care of the planet. Let me put it in a positive way.
Yeah.
But I know that's not what you meant. But I think what's funny is that I think everything is related to everything else, and what I'm hoping is that we build organizations where there is more respect and value and recognition for the human, where we build our practices centered in the human, knowing that will create value for the organization as an entity. I am hoping that in doing so, at least from the perspective of HR, I am hoping that we are truly contributing to creating a better world, and that we see that down the road, right? I mean, there are so many people who, like, even today, and of course, this is not a political conversation, but, they fear, like, what Black Lives Matter means, or what, critical race theory means, or what this other thing means. And I'm hoping that if we have genuine, authentic conversations in the workplace, and we talk about this, we're going to remove fear from people who have a lot of assumptions about what these things mean, very often wrong assumptions, and we're going to bring them to the bright side. And what I mean by that is we're going to bring them to a place where now they have a better understanding of why these things are happening, and they maybe even themselves become advocates of the right causes. That's how we create a better world. And I know for a fact, and I fully believe that we can make it happen from HR. It just takes a lot of courage, and it especially takes a lot of, I want to say, belief in the power that we have to make this happen. If you don't believe in the power, you're not going to make it happen, even if you have the money or the skills or whatever. So that's what I'm hoping.
So I feel like you sort of left me with the last truth bomb as well. Because I always ask this question, Enrique, right? Like, what's your last truth bomb about HR's role in creating more diverse, equitable, inclusive world?
Yeah, well, it is, it can be a billion things, but I'm going to say it is about us believing in our own power. And that's how we're going to make things happen, right? I have found that in general, it is not the lack of skills or the lack of functional capabilities. It is the lack of believing in our power what prevents us from actually making change and becoming agents of goodness in the world. So it's like, I always say to people, if you have all the skills that somebody else may be craving for, but you don't believe in your own power, nothing will happen out of that. But if you are the kind of person who says, I believe in this, even though I don't have the skills today, you just jump in the journey and you say, I'm going to learn how to do it. I'm going to learn how to make it happen because I know that my calling is just way higher and way bigger than just this little thing that we have done in HR for a long time. So you got to believe in that calling, in that power.
Oh my gosh. So I'm going to get you t-shirts like use your powers for good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Believe in your power and use it for good.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I knew this was going to be a great conversation. So appreciate you. Appreciate you. Everything that you're doing in the world, right? We're out to create these positive ripple effects that we really can change society for the better, and just appreciate it. Keep it up. To all of you that are a part of the Everyday Inclusion and Belonging community, keep doing the next right thing. So we'll see you all next week.
Thank you.